Hello, and welcome back to Nocturne Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that drift through the Nocturne Noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1, I am proud of the woman I have become. But there are some memories that refuse to stay in the past. Most days, I can live normally. I work, take care of myself, laugh with people, and do all the ordinary things adults are supposed to do. But sometimes, especially at night, those old memories crawl back into my mind. They settle somewhere deep inside me and wait until I am tired and vulnerable. Then, I wake up afraid. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, convinced there is someone standing near my window. Other times, I hear a small sound somewhere in my home, and my whole body freezes before I can remind myself that I am safe. My therapist has been patient with me for years. She has never forced me to talk about anything before I was ready. She listens even when I struggle to explain things that sound impossible. Recently, she suggested that I write down exactly what happened to me when I was a child. She said memories often become more powerful when we spend years trying not to look at them. So this is me looking. This happened about 20 years ago. Back then, I lived with my father in a small house in the countryside. It was just the two of us. My mother had died giving birth to me. My father never said directly that he hated me for it, but children notice more than adults think they do. I could feel resentment in the way he looked at me and in the way he avoided looking at me. Sometimes, when he had been drinking, he would say things that made the truth clearer. Your mother was healthy before you. She never recovered after carrying you. You took everything out of her. He did not beat me. He did not starve me. He made sure I had clothes and food and went to school. If anyone had asked him whether he was a bad father, I am sure he would have said no. Maybe by his standards, he wasn't. But he did not know me. He never asked what cartoons I liked. He did not know which toys were my favorites. He never asked what I wanted for dinner or whether I was scared of thunderstorms. I cannot remember him ever sitting on the floor and playing with me. Most days, I stayed in my bedroom with old toys my grandmother had given me. I had dolls with tangled hair, wooden blocks, coloring books with half the pages already used, and a stuffed bunny that I carried almost everywhere. That rabbit probably received more affection from me than any human being did during those years. I was lonely. Looking back, I think that loneliness is part of what made everything that happened later possible. Every night followed the same routine. At exactly 8, my father would walk upstairs and stop outside my bedroom. It's 8. Time for bed. That was it. No bedtime story. No kiss on my forehead. No good night. No sleep well. Nothing. I would turn off my own light, crawl under the blanket, and rub my cheek against the soft fur of my stuffed rabbit until I eventually fell asleep. That routine was broken one stormy night. I woke to a sound I did not recognize. At first, I thought it might have been thunder. Rain struck the roof and windows hard enough to make the entire house sound alive. Wind pushed against the walls. I sat up slowly. My room was dark. The closet door was closed. My bedroom door was shut. My toys were exactly where I had left them, on the floor. Nothing seemed wrong. Then, lightning flashed. For less than a second, the whole room turned bright, and I saw a face in my window. I gasped and immediately dropped back down. I pulled my blanket over my head. Thunder followed the lightning so loudly that my old bed frame shook. My first thought was not to scream. It was that my father would be angry if I woke him. That says more about our relationship than anything else I could explain. I stayed beneath the covers. I tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Maybe a branch. Maybe rain on the glass. Maybe the lightning had made some strange pattern. But eventually, curiosity became stronger than fear. Very slowly, I lowered the blanket. I looked toward the window. She was still there. Her head was visible in the bottom left corner of the glass. A woman. At least, I believed she was a woman. She stared directly at me. I stopped breathing. Her eyes were enormous, almost perfectly round. They were also too far apart. Her head had almost no hair. There were only a few patches of thin fuzz growing from her scalp. Her jaw was wrong. It extended much farther down than a normal human jaw should. Her chin almost touched the center of her chest. She did not seem to have a nose. Instead, there were two small holes in the middle of her face. Even with all those strange features, something about her still appeared feminine. Maybe it was the shape of her face, maybe her eyes, I don't know. I only knew I was looking at something that appeared to be a woman, but had been built incorrectly. Tears filled my eyes. I made a small sound without meaning to. Even through the rain, she seemed to hear it. Her head slowly tilted. She studied me. Then she turned. As she did, I noticed another detail. She had no ears either. There were only two openings on either side of her head. Then she lowered herself. Her face disappeared beneath the window. I sat frozen for several minutes. Eventually, I forced myself out of bed. The floor was freezing beneath my feet. I dragged the small step stool across the room and placed it under the window. I climbed onto it. My hands shook as I lifted my head high enough to look outside. Nothing, only rain, fields, trees in the distance. Then I looked down. Our house had 2 floors. My bedroom was upstairs. The ground looked impossibly far below. No normal person could have stood outside and reached my window. There was no balcony, no tree, no ladder. Nothing. I went back to bed. I decided I would tell my father in the morning. I squeezed my stuffed bunny against my chest until my breathing slowed. Eventually, I fell asleep. When I came downstairs the next morning, my father was in his usual chair. He sat in the living room drinking black coffee and reading the newspaper. Dad? He didn't respond. Can I tell you something? Still nothing. He turned a page. Dad, there was a woman. I stopped. He took a loud sip of coffee. I could smell it from across the room. I hated that smell. I walked closer. Then I grabbed the arm of his recliner and tried to pull myself up so he would have to look at me. My movement surprised him. His hand jerked. The coffee spilled across his shirt and arm. Jesus. He jumped up. What is wrong with you? He stormed into the kitchen. I followed. He poured the remaining coffee into the sink and put his arm under cold water. I was already close to crying. I saw a woman last night. He sighed. She was looking through my window. Nonsense, I did, I swear. He didn't look at me. She had huge eyes, and she was staring right at me. There was nobody there, Beck, there was. Your room is on the 2nd floor. He finally turned. You know how high that is? I nodded. You had a nightmare. But I wasn't asleep when I saw her. Enough, Rebecca. His voice became harder. I have to clean this mess. Go upstairs. I wanted to keep arguing. I wanted him to come look at the window. I wanted him to tell me he believed me and that he would protect me. Instead, I went back upstairs. I closed the door. That whole day, I tried to convince myself he was right. There had been a storm. I had been scared. Maybe it was an owl. Maybe I had still been dreaming. Even as a child, I knew I was lying to myself. I cried a lot that day. None of my toys helped. That was the first time I saw her. I wish my father had believed me then. It took him years to apologize. Years of guilt. Years of destroying himself. For a long time, I could not forgive him. Sometimes I still don't know whether I truly have. During the next 2 weeks, the woman returned several times. Not every night. That almost made it worse. If she had appeared every night, maybe I could have prepared myself. Instead, I never knew. Some nights I would stare at the window until morning and see nothing. Then I would begin relaxing. Then, suddenly, she would be there again. Always watching. Always silent. Sometimes I saw only her eyes. Sometimes her whole face. She never knocked, never waved, never spoke. Then, during the 3rd week, everything changed. I had finally managed to sleep properly that night. She had not appeared for several days, and I was starting to believe she might be gone. A loud thud against my bedroom wall woke me. I sat straight up. My heart was already racing. Hello? The word escaped before I could stop it. Nobody answered. Then I saw something in the corner of my room, something that did not belong there. I turned my head. She was inside. The woman was crouched on a chair near my wall. My window was wide open behind her. She did not move. Neither did I. We stared at each other. It may have been seconds. It felt like hours. My breathing became loud and uneven. I kept thinking that she was a stranger. A stranger had entered my house. She was dangerous, yet she was doing nothing. Eventually, she moved one arm, very slowly. Her hand came out of the shadows. Moonlight touched her fingers. They were too long, far too thin. For a moment, I could not understand exactly what looked wrong about them. Then she turned her wrist. Each finger had one extra joint. Too many knuckles. Too much length. I stared in disgust. I was a child. I did not know how to hide my reaction. The woman noticed. Her entire body stiffened. Then she stood. A rough, high-pitched sound escaped her throat. For the first time, I saw how tall she truly was. Her head reached the ceiling. Actually, it reached beyond where the ceiling allowed, forcing her neck to bend. Her legs were painfully thin. The skin around her knees looked stretched and hard, almost like the skin of a reptile. She took 3 steps toward me. Slow, balanced, controlled. Then she leaned over my bed. Her face stopped less than a foot from mine. I could smell something strange on her. Wet soil, rotting leaves, something sour. She lifted one finger. Then, with surprising gentleness, she touched beneath my chin. Her skin felt cold, waxy, that broke me. I started crying, not quietly. I sobbed so hard I could barely breathe. I pressed myself against the wall. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit her, bite her, run, but there was nowhere to go. She pulled her finger away. Then she just stood there, watching me. That was almost worse. She did not feel angry anymore. She did not even feel openly cruel. She felt curious, like I was some animal she had found. Finally, I screamed, "Dad." The woman remained still. "Dad, please, she's here." The woman is in my room. I squeezed my eyes shut and covered my face with my hands. I heard my father's bedroom door open. His footsteps came down the hallway. My bedroom door opened. Nothing happened. No yelling, no struggle, no scream. I slowly lowered my hands. The woman was gone. The window was closed. My father stood in the doorway. His face was furious. He looked around the room, then at me. His expression said everything. What now? He shook his head. Then he left. My door closed. A few seconds later, his bedroom door slammed. I stared at the empty chair. I knew what I had seen. She had been there. There was no possible way she could have left without either of us hearing her. After that night, I stopped expecting my father to save me. Sometimes I still screamed when she appeared. Sometimes I called for him. I would hear his bed move in the room down the hall. He heard me, but he never came. Eventually, I understood. I was alone, a little girl in a house in the countryside. No mother, no siblings, no close friends. And the only adult who was supposed to protect me did not believe me. Maybe that is why, when the woman finally spoke, I listened. Hello, her voice was rough and weak. It sounded like someone who had gone years without speaking. I sat with my knees against my chest. I said nothing. Can you hear me? I nodded. She watched me. Your dad, she struggled with every word. He treats you bad. I remained silent. He screams at you. Something changed inside me. She knew. Someone had noticed. Even if that someone was the monster standing in my bedroom. Do you have a mother? I shook my head. What happened? She died. The woman leaned slightly closer. When? When I was born. I swallowed. Dad says it was my fault. Her huge eyes stayed fixed on me. He said I made her body sick. I didn't mean to. I didn't want her to die. It wasn't your fault. The words were simple. I had never heard anyone say them to me before. Something about that made me want to cry again. Not from fear this time, from relief. The woman slowly stood from the chair. I immediately pulled back, but she didn't touch me. She walked to the bed and sat at the far corner. I had a daughter, she said, like you. I looked at her. She had long brown hair, like yours. What happened to her? The question escaped before I thought about it. Her eyes lowered. A boy pushed her into the river. Her voice became even quieter. She never came back up. I forgot my fear for a moment. I'm sorry. I tried to help. She stared at the floor. I cannot swim well. She paused. I could not find her. I imagined a little girl beneath dark water. I hugged my rabbit tighter. Becky always loved the river, the woman whispered. I noticed the name. Becky, almost the same thing my father called me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she looked up. Do you like birds? I nodded. Foxes? Yes. Animals? A lot. I told her about the raccoons I sometimes saw in the field. I told her about deer near the woods. The woman's eyes narrowed. I realized she was smiling. They live near my house. You have a house? Yes, then why do you come here? She ignored the question. Instead, she asked something else. Do you like your dad? That was difficult. Children are taught that they love their parents, that it is automatic. But did I like him? I thought about how he ignored me, how he blamed me for my mother, how he never came when I screamed. No, I admitted. I don't like him. The woman moved her feet onto the bed. I had never looked closely at them before. They were not human feet. 3 long toes pointed forward. Another extended backward from where a heel should have been. Each toe was almost as long as my forearm. Thick bands of hard skin circled them. They looked like bird feet. "You could live with me," she said. I stared at her, at my house. She leaned forward. "We could watch animals every day." I didn't answer. "I would never be mean like your dad." Her voice was warm again. "I promise." For one terrible moment, I considered it. I really did. I was a lonely child. Someone was offering to take care of me, to want me, to be interested in what I liked. Even if she looked like a monster, that mattered. Sometimes I still feel guilty about how tempted I was. "You could be my daughter," she whispered. "And I could be your new mommy." I shook my head. "No," her smile faded. "I can't." "Why?" My dad would worry. I wasn't even sure that was true. He would call the police. Everyone would be mad at me. The woman became completely still. Something changed in her eyes. The kindness disappeared. "Come to my house." Her voice had become much deeper. I pulled the blanket toward my chin. "No, Rebecca." The way she said my full name made my skin crawl. "Come, no." She stood. Her feet pressed into the mattress. Her body seemed different now. The soft illusion was gone. Her skin looked gray and wet. Cracks spread across it. Yellow fluid leaked from those cracks and soaked into my blanket. Her knees pushed through torn skin. "Rebecca," she straightened, her back pressed against the ceiling light. I heard bones cracking, one after another. Her spine stretched. Her body rose higher. She towered over the bed. Then her face lowered toward mine. Her eyes glowed yellow in the darkness. Dark red circles surrounded the irises. Her mouth opened. Yellow teeth appeared behind thin lips. Hot, foul breath washed across my face. That was when I finally accepted what I had known from the beginning. She was not a woman. She was not human. Monsters were real. And one was in my bedroom. Thick fluid dripped from her mouth. It landed on my cheek and burned. I screamed and tried to wipe it away. She grabbed both my wrists. Her strength was unbelievable. She pulled me out of bed. I kicked. I bit her fingers. They tasted sour and rotten. I bit hard enough that she finally released me. "Go away," I screamed. "Leave me alone." Her mouth changed. It stretched into a terrible smile. Then one of her feet wrapped around my ankle. The long toes tightened. She pulled. My body flew across the floor. My head struck the dresser. Pain exploded through my skull. Something warm ran into my hair. I became dizzy. The room spun. She tightened her grip. I was small. Weak, there was no way I could fight her. For the first time in my life, I understood that I might die. She hopped toward the window on her other foot. She opened it. Then she began climbing out. Half her body disappeared through the opening. Her free foot wrapped around the window frame. Then she pulled me toward it. My hands scratched across the floor. I kicked at furniture. Nothing helped. The window came closer. I knew I had seconds. My hand caught the nightstand. I grabbed it with both arms. I held on. She pulled. The nightstand moved. I screamed. The lamp fell. Glass exploded across the floor. I pulled harder. The whole piece of furniture tipped over. The crash was enormous. I heard my father move. A door opened down the hall. His footsteps came fast. Dad. I screamed louder than I ever had before. "Help me. Please." The monster pulled again. My hips struck the wall beneath the window. My fingers were slipping. Then my bedroom door slammed open. "What the hell is going on?" My father stopped. For the first time, he saw her. I know he did, because his voice disappeared. "Dad." He turned and ran. For half a second, I thought he was abandoning me. Then I heard another door crash open. His closet. He came back carrying a gun. The first shot was deafening. Then another, and another. Wood exploded around the window. Glass shattered. The smell of gunpowder filled the room. I screamed until my throat hurt. Then, suddenly, the grip around my ankle disappeared. I fell. My legs struck the floor. Pain tore through me. I looked down for only a second. There was too much blood. Parts of my skin moved in ways they should not. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. I looked toward the window. The creature was gone. My father dropped the gun. He grabbed me. He held me against his chest. For the first time I could remember, he held me like a father. He kept saying things. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please, I believe you. I'm sorry. You're okay. I've got you. I don't remember everything. My hearing seemed far away. Then, darkness took me. I woke up in a hospital. I never saw the woman again. My father and I moved far away from that house. My left leg could not be saved. It was amputated above the knee. The police asked many questions. For a while, they suspected my father. They thought he had shot me. Technically, some of the wounds were caused by his gun, but I told them again and again that he had been trying to save me. I told them a monster had been pulling me out of the window. They did not believe that part. Eventually, they decided an unknown intruder had entered the house and attempted to kidnap me. I stopped arguing. There was no point. I am 26 now. I have been in therapy for years. Nobody ever truly believed the monster part. Some doctors thought trauma had changed my memory. At one point, medication was suggested because they believed I might have experienced hallucinations. I know what I saw. I remember the creature's fingers. I remember the way its toes closed around my ankle. I remember the smell of its breath. I remember biting its hand. I remember being dragged toward the window. I remember the bullets. I remember my father holding me. Eventually, I learned that if I wanted people to listen, I had to change the story. I started calling her an intruder, a woman, a kidnapper, something human. That made everyone more comfortable. But privately, I never stopped searching. The idea that she might have visited other children has haunted me for years. How many lonely children had seen her outside their windows? How many had parents who did not believe them? How many accepted when she offered to become their mother? How many disappeared? Sometimes, late at night, I searched the internet for stories. Women with bird-like feet, strange creatures stealing children, mothers returning after death. Most of what I find is useless. Urban legends, folklore, people trying to scare each other. But one night, I came across something that made me stop. The guhun yao, sometimes called the guhuo bird. I am not saying with certainty that this is what visited me. I cannot prove that. I am only saying that it is the closest thing I have ever found. In Chinese folklore, stories describe a supernatural creature connected to women who died during childbirth. Depending on the version, these spirits appear as women during the day and transform into birds, or strange bird-like beings at night. Some stories describe them stealing infants or young children. They supposedly take those children because they can no longer have or raise children of their own. Different sources tell the legend in different ways. Folklore changes over time. Details get added or removed. Maybe the similarity means nothing. But I keep thinking about her feet. The toes. The strange eyes. The lack of normal ears. The way she talked about her dead daughter. The way she asked me to become hers. Most of all, I remember the name she used. Becky, her daughter's name. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe she lied. Maybe she had already decided that I was supposed to replace someone. I will probably never know. Writing this has been difficult. But I also feel lighter. For 20 years, I have carried that bedroom with me. The window, the storm, the chair in the corner, the sound of my father refusing to come. The feeling of those claws around my ankle. My prosthetic leg means I can never completely forget. Every morning when I put it on, there is a reminder. But there is another part of the memory, too. My father coming through that door. My father finally seeing what I had been trying to tell him. My father fighting for me. Our relationship changed after that night. He became protective, maybe too protective. He apologized constantly. He tried to make up for years that could never be returned. But guilt had already gotten inside him. He blamed himself for not believing me sooner. He blamed himself for my leg. He blamed himself for every night I had been alone with that creature. I moved out when I was 17. A month later, my father drank himself to death. For years, I was angry at him even after he was gone. Angry because he had ignored me. Angry because he had made me feel unwanted. Angry because maybe none of it would have happened if he had listened after the first night. Then I would remember him running into my room. I would remember the gunshots. I would remember him holding me while I bled. I would remember those apologies. Forgiveness has not been simple. I don't think real forgiveness usually is. It does not erase anything. It does not make what happened acceptable. It does not give me back my childhood. But I understand him differently now than I did when I was a child. He lost his wife. He turned that grief into resentment. Then his resentment nearly cost him his daughter, too. He spent the rest of his life knowing it. I cannot tell him any of this now. I cannot tell him that I survived. I cannot tell him I grew up. I cannot tell him that despite everything, there were moments when he was the father I needed. Especially that final night. So if writing this is supposed to release something that has been trapped inside me, then there is one last thing I need to say. Dad, you should have believed me. You should have protected me sooner. You hurt me in ways you probably never fully understood. But when it finally mattered most, you came through that door. You saw the monster. You fought it. You saved my life. I wish you had lived long enough to know that I eventually understood that. I wish you had forgiven yourself, because after all these years, I think I finally forgive you. Story 2. I am writing this because I need to warn you. Stay away from the land beyond the mountains. There are things about that place I still do not understand, and I doubt I ever will. There are things I have seen that I do not have proper words for. Even if I somehow escape this place, I do not think I could sit across from another person and explain everything that happened here without sounding insane. That is why I am writing instead. Maybe words on a page will reach farther than I ever could. Maybe they will reach you before you make the same mistake. The place beyond the mountains is not empty. It is not forgotten. It is not dead. I wish it were. There are horrors in this land so old and terrible that even the gods themselves seem to have abandoned it. Some people here once believed the gods left because they feared mankind. That is the kind of foolish pride humans have always carried. We see something powerful disappear and immediately assume it must have been afraid of us. We look at ourselves and imagine greatness. We put crowns on our own heads and call ourselves chosen. But distance can make anything seem holy. If the true divine is far enough away, even a snake crawling through dirt can begin to look like a god. That is how desperate people become. And even if some great light appeared in the sky and revealed the truth to all mankind, I believe half the world would still reject it. Some would crown themselves. Others would bow to the first powerful man who told them what they wanted to hear. Very few would listen. I hope you are not one of those fools, because if you are, then nothing I write will save you. You must not uncover this land. You must not search for it. Do not cross the mountains. Do not follow old maps. Do not listen to songs about what lies beyond the dry northern valleys. Let this place remain buried in darkness. It deserves darkness. The farther you remain from it, the better your chances are of living a normal life. Stay near the distant shores. Stay where the sun still rises with its ordinary golden light. Stay somewhere your children might grow old beneath a sky that does not turn crimson. Stay somewhere they will never hear the deep bellowing that comes from beneath the ground. You may already know part of this story. Almost every culture has some version of it. A great flood, a world covered by water, a small group of people surviving while everyone else dies. The old stories say the survivors were chosen. They say a god warned them. They say they were righteous, lucky, or worthy. They say water poured down from the heavens and rose from the depths of the earth until the world disappeared beneath endless waves. You have probably heard some version of that story since childhood. It is comforting. That is why we kept telling it. It is also a lie. The survivors were not chosen. They were not especially good. They were not saved because some divine power loved them more than the people who drowned. They survived because they were afraid to die. They were selfish. They were desperate. They clawed at life while the rest of the world disappeared beneath the sea. Perhaps that sounds unfair. Perhaps survival itself does not sound sinful. But you must understand what happened later. Their survival was not a blessing. It was defiance. And maybe there are some things mankind was never meant to survive. The flood lasted so long that the survivors stopped counting the days. Some records say months. Others say years. Nobody knows. The boat carrying them was small compared to the water around it. During the worst storms, the vessel was like an insect being thrown beneath the heel of a giant. Waves rose higher than buildings. The sky vanished behind black clouds. The deck cracked. Wooden beams screamed under the pressure. Every few minutes, the survivors believed the boat would finally split apart. But somehow, it never did. It continued. Day after day. Night after night. At first, food was not a serious problem. The ocean seemed full of life. Fish gathered near the boat. Strange sea creatures floated near the surface. The survivors lowered nets and hooks and brought enough food aboard to keep themselves alive. Some believed this was another sign that they had been protected. That belief did not last long. The ocean changed. It happened slowly at first. The fish disappeared. Then the birds stopped flying overhead. No whales surfaced. No insects landed on the deck. Nothing moved beneath the water. The sea itself still shifted and rolled, but it had become completely empty. The survivors stared into dark water and saw nothing. not even small shapes beneath the surface. Then the silence began. There is ordinary silence, the kind you hear late at night when everyone is sleeping. This was not like that. This silence seemed to have weight. It pressed against the ears. It filled the spaces between thoughts. There was no wind, no birds, no insects, no distant thunder. Even the sound of the ocean seemed muted. The survivors could still see waves moving, but somehow the water made almost no noise. Several people later described hearing a high ringing inside their heads. At first, they thought it was caused by exhaustion. Then, everyone began hearing it. A thin tone, constant, sharp, impossible to escape. People started talking loudly just to cover it, then shouting, then singing. They beat spoons against pots. They struck the walls of the boat. Some prayed. Some screamed. Some laughed until their throats became raw. Anything was better than hearing that endless tone beneath the silence. It did not help. The sound remained. Some people stopped sleeping. Others sat in corners shaking. A few claimed they could hear whispers inside the ringing. Nobody agreed on what the voices said. Then the first person jumped overboard. He did not cry for help. He simply climbed onto the edge of the boat and stepped into the sea. The water swallowed him. Nobody saw him surface. After that, others followed. Some threw themselves into the ocean. Others attacked their companions. People who had lived together peacefully began beating one another with tools, broken boards, and cooking knives. Several survivors started praying to gods nobody had heard of before, names that did not belong to any religion they knew. They whispered these names while hurting themselves. Some smiled while doing it. Within a very short time, nearly half the people aboard the boat were dead. Then, almost immediately after the worst of the madness, someone saw land. At first, they thought it was another hallucination. Then everyone saw it. Dark green hills rising from the water, a shoreline, trees, mountains farther inland. After endless days of water, the sight of Earth seemed impossible. The survivors cried. Some fell to their knees. Others kissed the deck. The same mysterious madness that had taken them began to fade. The ringing weakened. The terrible silence lifted slightly. Wind returned. The boat drifted toward shore. Eventually, a wave pushed it onto the beach. Those who remained alive climbed onto land. They believed they had found salvation. They believed this was the promised land. Maybe they were right. Maybe it had simply been promised to something else. There is another detail the old stories got wrong. The heavens never opened. There was no rain, not one drop. The sky was covered in thick black clouds, but they produced nothing. The survivors said the clouds seemed full of water. They looked heavy enough to fall, but they never did. The flood had come entirely from below. The seas rose. That was all. The oceans simply climbed across the land and reclaimed everything. When the survivors reached the new land, their first concern was not food. They needed fresh water. The ocean might have surrounded them, but they could not drink it. They entered the forest together. For days, they searched. The land itself looked healthy. Trees grew everywhere. Animals moved through the brush. Birds appeared again. There were berries, roots, insects, and wild plants. Everything suggested there should have been streams. There were none. No rivers, no ponds, no springs. Some stories say they searched the mountains first. Others say the mountains were the final place they tried. This disagreement has never been settled. Those who claimed the mountains were searched first insisted there had been no water there. They said they climbed deep into the highlands and found nothing. The mountains were green. Animals lived there. Plants grew. But the ground was dry. No rivers, no pools, no waterfalls. Because of that, they returned to lower ground. But another group later claimed this could not have happened. According to them, the mountains were avoided until the end. Some of the survivors were frightened of them. Nobody explained exactly why. Perhaps there was something about their shape. Perhaps something could be heard from within them. Whatever the reason, those people insisted that nobody reached the mountains until several days later. Both groups told their version until they died. Neither changed their story. The only part everyone agreed on came afterward. Water was eventually found in the mountains. A lake, deep between dark rock walls. The people who claimed they had already searched the area were terrified. They insisted the lake had not been there before. Not hidden, not smaller, not covered by plants. It simply had not existed. Now it did. The water appeared clear. Beautiful, even. The surface was smooth. It reflected the mountains above it. But when the survivors leaned over the edge, they could not see the bottom. The clear water slowly became darker with depth until it turned completely black. One survivor described it as looking down through glass into an endless night. The people who believed the lake had appeared suddenly begged the others not to drink. They said something was wrong. They said water did not simply appear. They said they should leave. Then animals came. Deer approached the shore. Birds landed nearby. Small creatures emerged from the forest. They drank. Nothing happened. The survivors watched for a long time. Eventually, thirst became stronger than fear. One person drank, then another. Soon everyone was drinking from the lake. The water was cold, clean. Some claimed it tasted sweeter than anything they had ever known. For a short time, everything seemed fine. Then the flood began to retreat. The ocean surrounding the land lowered. Day after day, more earth appeared. Old coastlines returned. Ruined cities emerged. Fields, valleys, the world the survivors had once known slowly reappeared. They could have left. They could have returned. They did not. Instead, they remained near the mountains. They built homes. They raised children. They made the strange land their permanent home. The place they discovered became the foundation of everything that came later. The same land you know today. The same mountains children still sing about in old nursery rhymes. North of the region where pale sand blows across the ground like snow, the mountains still stand. And somewhere inside them is the lake. The lake that kept the survivors alive. Or perhaps the lake that prevented them from dying when they should have. For a while, people continued drinking from it. Then, the lake changed. Nobody knows exactly when. Perhaps it had always been wrong and simply waited. Animals began dying near the shore. Not violently. That would almost have been easier. They fell asleep. A deer would drink, take several steps, then lower itself onto the ground. Birds would land near the water and close their eyes. Fish beneath the surface slowed until they stopped moving. Their hearts simply ceased. At first, people thought the animals died peacefully. Some still believe that. They call it the kindness of the lake. I do not. I have seen the sleep. It is not peaceful. The body lies still, yes, but the face tells another story. Muscles tighten. Eyes move rapidly beneath closed lids. Hands or paws twitch. Sometimes the mouth opens as if trying to scream. Whatever happens in that sleep is not rest. It is a dream without waking, a nightmare without sound. The dead began piling along the lake. The smell became unbearable. The mountain air changed too. It had once been cool and windy. Then the wind stopped. The seasons stopped changing properly. Winter never truly came. Summer never completely left. A heavy heat settled over the mountains and stayed there. The air became still. Breathing felt difficult. The lake turned from clear water into a dark reddish brown, almost crimson. The shore filled with rotting animals. Flies should have covered them. There were almost none. Even insects avoided the place. That should have been the final warning. The survivors should have left. They did not. They claimed they could not. Some said the lake called to them. Others said they had seen something beneath the surface. Nobody could describe it clearly. The descriptions changed depending on who told the story. Some said it had eyes. Others said it was too large to understand. Some insisted there was nothing physical there at all, only a shape created by the darkness. But everyone agreed on one thing. Once they truly looked into the lake, they no longer wanted to leave. It held them there. Perhaps it was hunger. Perhaps fear. Perhaps something stronger than either. Over time, the animals were no longer enough. All cycles eventually end. Life rises from dust. Life returns to dust. We know this. Every living thing dies. But humans spend their entire lives trying to delay the obvious. We heal ourselves. We hide from danger. We build walls. We pray. We fight. We bargain. We call survival sacred. Maybe that was the true sin of the first survivors. They refused to die when death came for the world. And whatever lived in the lake noticed. The animals stopped satisfying it. Then, the offerings began. At first, people claimed they were accidents. Someone vanished near the shore. A child disappeared. A hunter never returned. Then, the stories became harder to deny. Families brought animals to the lake intentionally. When that stopped working, they brought criminals, then strangers, then their own blood. The lake always wanted more. One night, it rose. Not the water, something else. The town had grown by then. Homes covered the lower mountains. Families were preparing for bed. Some were cooking. Others were talking around small fires. Children were sleeping. Then the ground began to rumble. The vibration was weak at first. People felt cups shaking on tables. Then the rumbling became rhythmic. A pulse. Again, a deep humming sound spread through the earth. It seemed to come from far below. The same rhythm repeated until the entire settlement could feel it through their bones. Then, everything stopped. Silence. The same silence the first survivors had experienced on the ocean. Every flame in the village went out at the exact same moment. Candles, fireplaces, lanterns, cooking fires, all of them. Darkness swallowed the settlement. Complete darkness. The same blackness seen at the bottom of the lake. The people living closest to the center of the village fell asleep almost immediately. It did not matter what they were doing. Some were already lying in bed. Others were standing in kitchens. Some were holding children. They simply collapsed. Every one of them. None woke again. Among those who died were all of the original survivors of the flood. Every single one. Maybe that was coincidence. I do not believe it was. The outer village experienced something different. Those people did not die. Instead, they forgot. When morning came, they remembered going about their lives. They remembered the fires going out. After that, there was nothing. Hours were missing from their minds. Nobody could explain what happened. Only a few children remembered pieces. They spoke of shapes walking between the houses. They spoke of people standing motionless in the roads. One child said the mountain had opened its mouth. Another said something enormous moved beneath the village. The adults dismissed them. Children imagine things. Children have nightmares. Children cannot be trusted. That was easier than believing them. Eventually, most of the village stopped thinking about the missing time. Maybe that ignorance saved them for a while. But after that night, the question changed. Nobody wondered whether the lake would take people again. The only question was when. The truth has been discovered and buried many times since then. Kings learned it. Priests learned it. Soldiers, farmers, travelers, scholars, parents, children. Some tried to destroy the lake. Some tried to block the mountain passages. Others worshipped it. Many offered everything they had. Animals, gold, homes, families, themselves. It made no difference. Its hunger has no limit. It consumes because consumption is what it is. If you feed it, it becomes hungry. If you refuse it, it becomes hungry. There is no bargain. There is no victory. That is why I am writing to you. I know who you are. Or at least I know who they say you are. The hero, the one who believes you can save us. Maybe people have told you that you are different. Maybe they have shown you old texts. Maybe you carry some weapon, blessing, bloodline, or knowledge they believe can end this. Forget it. Throw it away. You cannot win. There is no battle left to fight. The war ended long before either of us was born. Whatever lives beneath this land won before we ever understood there was a war at all. Do not come here. Do not let curiosity turn into duty. Do not let duty turn into pride. That is how it reaches people. First, you hear the story. Then, you think about the mountains. Then, you dream about them. Then, you begin wondering if maybe everyone else simply failed because they were not you. That thought is the hook. Once it enters your mind, it moves deeper. You start seeing the mountains in ordinary things. The shape of clouds, dark rooftops, shadows against walls. You begin hearing the humming late at night. Then the dreams start. A black lake, a red sky, something breathing under the water. Eventually, you convince yourself that going there is your choice. It is not. By then, it has already called you. Run in the opposite direction. Do not run toward the mountains. Run toward the sea. Put as much water as possible between yourself and this place. I know how strange that sounds after everything I have told you about the flood. But the sea is not the enemy. Not anymore. The sea tried to take this world once. Perhaps now I understand why. Maybe the flood was not punishment. Maybe it was an attempt to drown something that should never have survived. Maybe humanity saved the wrong thing. Maybe the first survivors carried the curse back with them when they drank from that lake. I do not know. There is too much I do not know. I only know what I hear beneath the ground every night. The bellows are getting louder. They come in long waves, deep enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Sometimes the water in cups trembles before the sound reaches us. Sometimes children wake crying before the adults hear anything. The older people pretend not to notice. We have become very good at pretending. The sky is changing too. At sunset, the clouds above the mountains turn red. Not orange, not pink. Red, deep crimson. The light makes everything look wet with blood. Some people kneel when it happens. Others close their windows. I do neither. There is no point. The thing beneath us knows we are here. It has always known. Last night, every dog in the village stopped barking at the same time. Then the humming began. 3 pulses. Slow, deep, the ground moved beneath my feet. I waited for the flames to go out. They did not. Not yet. But I know the old stories. I know what comes next. That is why I am finishing this now. If this letter reaches you, burn any map that came with it. Do not search for my name. Do not come looking for me. My fate is already sealed. There is nothing you can do for me. If you truly want to help those of us still living here, then stay away. Every person who enters this land gives it another reason to remain hungry. Every hero who comes to save us becomes another offering. I have watched it happen before. Men arrive with swords, others with books. Some come with machines, some come with faith. They all eventually stand at the edge of the lake. They all look down. They all see something. After that, they stop talking about saving anyone. They only talk about feeding it. I do not want that to happen to you. Maybe you will be luckier than I was. Maybe you still have enough distance between yourself and this place to choose another path. Go south, go west, go anywhere. Find a town where people have never heard the nursery rhyme about the mountains. Find a place where children do not draw red lakes without knowing why. Build a home there. Have a family if that is what you want. Let your children grow beneath a normal sun. Let them believe darkness is only the absence of light. Let them sleep without hearing something moving beneath the earth. That is the greatest victory you can have. Not defeating this place, escaping it. For too long, mankind has believed courage means walking toward the monster. Sometimes, courage is knowing when something cannot be beaten. Sometimes, survival is not cowardice. Sometimes, the greatest act of defiance is refusing to become another sacrifice. I can hear the humming again. It is stronger now. The walls are shaking. Something in the village just screamed. Someone outside is calling people toward the mountain. I will not go, not willingly. But I know how these stories end. The flame beside me is getting smaller. There is no wind. Still, it keeps shrinking. I can smell the lake from here. Rot, mud, something sweet beneath it. The same smell comes every time before the silence. If you remember nothing else from what I have written, remember this. The gods did not abandon this land because they feared us. They abandoned it because something was already here. Something that existed before our prayers, before our kingdoms, maybe before the world itself. And whatever it has been waiting beneath those mountains longer than anyone remembers. It survived the flood. It survived the survivors. It survived every generation that came after them. It will survive me. Do not let it survive through you. Stay away from the mountains. Do not follow the crimson light. Do not listen when the ground begins to hum. And if someday, while standing safely on some distant shore, you hear a deep bellow from beneath the earth, do not turn around. Keep walking. My fate was decided long ago. Yours does not have to be. Story 3. A friend told me this would be a good place to share some stories from my younger days, so I thought I would finally write one down. I spent most of my adult life working. I was a mechanic for decades, the kind of man who could lose an entire afternoon under the hood of an old truck and only noticed the time when the sun disappeared. I never married, and I never had children. When I was younger, that never bothered me much. I always thought there would be time later. There wasn't. Now that I am an old man, one of my greatest fears is dying without leaving anything behind. I don't have children who will tell stories about me after I am gone. No grandchildren will remember the strange things I said or the lessons I learned. So maybe this is the closest I will get. If I can leave behind a story, perhaps some small part of me survives. This happened when I was a teenager, many years ago, in a small provincial town where nights were darker than anything you see in the city. There were no bright streets, no glowing signs, no endless traffic. When the sun went down, the world seemed to shrink to whatever small circle of light came from your house. Beyond that was darkness, trees, fields, mountains, and whatever else lived out there. That particular night was cold. My grandfather, Andang, was sitting in his old recliner, smoking one of the cigars he made himself from wild tobacco that grew around our town. He had been making those cigars for as long as I could remember. The smell filled the entire house. Warm tobacco, smoke, dry leaves, something sweet and woody. Even today, if I smell that kind of tobacco, I think of him. I was sitting at a small table doing my homework. I remember being annoyed because I had a lot to finish before school the next morning. My grandmother had gone outside earlier. I assumed she was checking on something near the animals. We had livestock back then. Chickens, a few pigs, and cows. One of those cows was named Shelley. She had been with our family for years. She was too old to have calves anymore, and grandfather refused to butcher her. He said she had earned the right to grow old. Shelley had disappeared several weeks earlier. We looked around the nearby fields for a while, but grandfather eventually said she had probably wandered into the forest and died. He seemed sad about it, but that was life in the province. Animals disappeared. Animals died. You learn to accept it. That night, while I was working, the front door suddenly flew open. My grandmother stumbled inside. I had never seen her look like that before. She was barefoot. Mud covered her legs. Her clothes were soaked with sweat. Her hair hung around her face in wet strands. She was breathing so hard it sounded painful. She kept lifting her feet and hopping strangely, almost like insects were crawling over her skin. Andang. My grandfather immediately sat forward. Andang. She was crying now. I found Shelley. Grandfather stood. What? I saw her. Our cow. I saw her. Where? In the trees. Her voice went high with terror. Then she said something I had never heard before. It's the danglemouth. The moment the word left her lips, her body collapsed. Grandfather moved faster than I had ever seen him move. He caught her before her head hit the floor. Grandmother. I jumped from my chair. Grandfather carried her to the recliner and carefully lowered her into it. He knelt beside her. For a second, he pressed his lips against her forehead. His hands trembled. I had never seen Grandfather afraid. Angry, yes. Sad, yes. Tired, often. But afraid? Never. What was she talking about? I asked. He did not answer me immediately. He kept staring at my grandmother. Then he whispered one word. Danglemouth, his face had changed. His eyes looked wet and distant, like he was seeing something from a long time ago. Danglemouth, he repeated. Then he gave a dry little laugh. It had no humor in it. I suppose I never told you about that. About what? The legend. What is the Danglemouth? His eyes snapped toward me. Iho listened to me carefully. Iho was what he often called me. It meant something like son or boy, depending on the way he said it. That night, he said it with such seriousness that I stopped asking questions. He pointed toward his bedroom. Under my bed is an old pack of cigarettes. Concords, go find it. What? Now, I ran. I dropped to my knees beside his bed and reached underneath. Dust stuck to my fingers. My hand touched old boxes, a shoe, some newspapers. Then I found something small and rectangular. An old yellow cigarette pack. Concords, I brought it out. It felt heavier than cigarettes should. When I returned, Grandfather was standing at the door. He looked like he was preparing for war. Take that to Meringue Sally. Why? Tell her to come to the square. What's inside? She'll understand. He put on his slippers. Then he stepped outside. Grandfather? He turned. After you give it to her, you come straight home. What's happening? You come home and you stay inside. He grabbed my shoulder. His fingers squeezed hard. And if you hear anything outside, anyone at all asking you to come out or let them in, you hold your breath. I stared at him. What? Hold your breath. Grandfather, I'm scared. His expression softened for only a moment. Scared is good. Then he disappeared into the darkness. I stood there holding the old cigarette pack. My grandmother was still unconscious in the chair. For a moment, I thought about staying with her. Then I remembered Grandfather's voice. Go. So I went. Outside, the sky was full of stars. There were so many that the darkness between them looked almost white. Nightbirds called from the trees. Insects buzzed and clicked. My feet kicked dust from the road as I ran. Meringue Sally lived only a few minutes away in a low shack made from old wood, straw, and corrugated metal. I reached her house and started shouting, Meringue Sally. No answer. Meringue Sally. It's Grandfather. The door opened. An old woman appeared. She was half-dressed and smelled strongly of alcohol. Her hair was wild. Her eyes looked angry and unfocused. What the hell? She had clearly been drinking. He told me to give you this. I handed her the Concord pack. She looked at it. The drunkenness disappeared from her face. Not slowly. Instantly, she took the box. She had not even opened it. Yet she knew. Did he say anything else? He said to come to the square. She turned and hurried toward her bedroom. I heard bottles falling, glass clinking. Something crashed. I stood near the door, trying not to cry. Why was everyone acting like this? It was just Shelley, our missing cow. She had been gone for weeks. Grandfather hadn't even spent much time looking for her. Now suddenly Grandmother was unconscious, Grandfather was running into the night, and Meringue Sally looked terrified. She returned wearing proper clothes. A huge bolo knife hung from her waist. The leather sheath was old and torn, but the blade looked perfectly maintained. Sharp, clean, dangerous, the Concord pack was still unopened in her pocket. She shoved money toward me. A 20-peso bill. Go buy yourself some candy. I stared at her. What? Then go home. I took the money and tucked it into my underwear because I had no good pockets. But I can help. Go home. She shouted it so loudly that I jumped. Then she ran into the night. I should have listened. I know that now. But I was a teenager. Curiosity is a dangerous thing when you are young. So is pride. I thought this was my chance to prove I was not a child. My grandmother had seen something. Grandfather was preparing for something. The entire town seemed frightened. I wanted to know why. I wanted to stand with the adults. I wanted to prove I could handle whatever they could. So naturally, I followed Meringue Saley. I stayed far behind her. At first, I could hear normal nighttime sounds. Birds, insects, dogs barking far away. But as we got closer to the town square, those sounds disappeared, one by one. I did not notice at first. Then suddenly I realized there was nothing. Complete silence. That memory still frightens me more than almost anything else. Our town was never silent. Even late at night, there were always televisions playing loudly through open windows. People loved American cartoons. Someone usually had karaoke running somewhere. Cicadas screamed from the trees. Frogs called from ditches. Dogs barked. Chickens made noise for no reason. There was always something. But that night, nothing. Not even wind. I don't remember hearing my own footsteps. I don't remember hearing myself breathe. It was like the whole town had been placed underwater. The square sat in the center of town. It was nothing special, just a wide paved space surrounded by homes and small businesses pressed close together. There were only a few narrow entrances between the buildings. You had to squeeze through some of them, one person at a time. During the day, the square was full of life. Children played there. People held aerobics classes, birthday parties, singing contests, political speeches, food stalls. Almost any excuse to gather people eventually ended up in that square. There was a cotton fruit tree in the northeast corner. When fruit fell and burst open on the pavement, red insects would gather around it. On good nights, music carried from the square all the way to our house. I always loved that sound. There was no music that night. Something else was waiting. Meringue Saley entered first. I slipped through the same narrow gap a few moments later. Then I looked into the square. I wish I hadn't. People were standing everywhere. Men, women, adults I recognized from town. They were completely naked. Their bodies were covered from head to toe in mud and cow dung. The smell was horrible. If you have ever smelled human waste sitting in heat for too long, you know it is different from animal waste. Sharper, bitter, almost metallic. The square smelled like a butcher shop mixed with an open sewer. But the people were not standing normally. Their arms stretched outward, their backs bent at terrible angles. Some leaned to one side. Some stood on one leg. Some crouched with their knees twisted. At first I thought they were praying. Then I understood. They were pretending to be trees. Branches had been tied to their fingers. Straw and twigs were pushed into their hair. They held their bodies in crooked shapes like trunks and limbs. Nobody moved. I swear I did not see a single chest rise. They all faced away from the center of the square. Then someone shouted, "Hey, my grandfather. Go home, hijo. This is adult business." I found him among the others. I almost didn't recognize him. He was naked too. Mud and dark green filth covered his entire body except his head. Branches were attached to his fingers. He looked less like my grandfather and more like some forest creature pretending to be human. He rushed toward me. The smell coming from him was so bad I nearly vomited. "I told you to leave, stupid boy." Meringue Saley spun around. Her face was full of anger. "There's no time," Grandfather said. "He needs to get in the circle." Meringue Saley looked toward the sky. "What? Is it already coming, Grandpa?" My voice broke. I looked toward the center of the square. "What is that?" Grandfather's face collapsed. "I'm sorry, hijo." A boy was lying there. I think his name was Sonny. I knew him from around town. It was difficult to be sure because only his head and feet were visible. His body had been forced inside a hollow log. His feet kicked wildly. His head twisted back and forth. At first I thought he was screaming. Then I realized he was calling someone. Mother. Again, mother. Ants covered him. Thousands, maybe millions. They crawled across his face, into his nose, across his eyes. I could see them moving over the white parts. He shook his head, but he couldn't escape. The insects bit him constantly. He looked like food thrown onto the ground. What's happening to him? I started backing away. Why is he inside that log? It's too late, Meringue Sally snapped. She looked at the time. Almost midnight. Even if he runs now, he won't make it home. Grandfather cursed. I had never heard him sound so desperate. He grabbed me. You stay with me. I nodded because I could barely speak. Yes, Grandfather, you have to look like me. Before I could ask what he meant, he grabbed a handful of filth. Mud. Cow dung. Something rotting. Then he rubbed it across my chest. I gagged. Stay still. He covered my arms, my legs, my back, my face. The dung was old and wet. Worms moved inside parts of it. The smell went into my nose and throat. I vomited. Everything I had eaten for dinner came up. Fried eggplant. Rice. Grandfather did not stop. Yes, good. Then he scooped up some of my vomit and rubbed it over me, too. I screamed at him to stop. He didn't. He spread it across his own face. By the end, my stomach hurt from vomiting. My eyes watered. Everything tasted like metal and filth. Grandfather no longer smelled like tobacco. He smelled like death. The boy in the log had stopped calling for his mother. Now he only made animal sounds. Small screams. Weak ones. I'm sorry, Grandfather whispered. Even beneath the dirt, I could see tears running from his eyes. I'm so sorry. Meringue Sally looked at the time. 11:58. Grandfather dragged me into the circle. He placed me beside him. Whatever happens, don't move. What's happening? My voice was barely a whisper. He looked toward the boy. The child in the middle. What about him? He's bait. I felt my stomach turn again. 1 minute. Meringue Sally shouted. She had joined the others now. Her body was covered in filth, too. Her mouth remained slightly open, as though she was afraid to breathe through her nose. Then we heard it. Far away in the mountains. Crack, boom, trees breaking. Not one tree. Hundreds, thousands, the sound moved closer unbelievably fast. We could see the forest shifting on the mountain. A path of trees bent and broke as something passed through them. Something enormous. Something invisible. It looked like a snake moving through tall grass, except the grass was an entire forest. The trail came toward us faster than any animal should move. Kilometers in seconds. I wanted to run. Grandfather looked at me. There was terrible fear in his eyes. If something goes wrong, hold your breath. I nodded. And run toward home. Get as close as you can. Then sit on the ground, close your eyes, and positions. Meringue Sally shouted. Grandfather stopped speaking immediately. He bent his knees, twisted his back, raised his arms. He became a tree. I copied him. His body shook. He had arthritis. Holding that position must have been agony. But he did not move. Then the crashing in the mountains stopped. Silence. It had arrived. I heard it before I understood what I was seeing. A cow. A cow screaming, but not a normal sound. Years earlier, when I was 13, Grandfather had once tried to teach me to butcher a weak cow. The animal had stopped eating after another cow died. It had become thin. Grandfather thought I was old enough to learn. I prayed before I swung the cleaver. Then I closed my eyes. That was my mistake. I did not strike hard enough. The blade hit near the neck, slipped badly, and opened the cow's throat without killing it immediately. I still remember that sound. Pain, fear, betrayal, the animal understood something terrible had happened, and it screamed with every bit of life it had left. I thought that was the worst sound a cow could make. I was wrong. Shelley appeared above the square. Floating, no dangling, her body hung perfectly straight. Her legs hung below her like dead leaves. She was suspended from something we could not see. There was no rope, no chain, nothing. She simply hung from the sky. Her legs twitched. Her body rose, then dropped. 10 meters upward, then slowly down. Up, down, every movement pulled another horrible sound from her lungs. The poor animal was still alive. Grandfather began shaking harder. He loved that cow. That was why he had never killed her. He had allowed her to grow old. Now she dangled above him like a toy. The boy in the log saw her. His screaming became louder again. Shelley drifted closer. Then, when she was only a short distance from the child, something changed. Everyone in the square seemed to see it at once. A shape stood among us. Black, tall, impossible. I could call it a creature. That would be wrong. Creature makes you imagine something with a body. Something with limits. This thing had no limits I could understand. It had 2 legs. Maybe a torso. Maybe. But it was not human. Its darkness seemed darker than the sky around it. Looking upward at it felt like falling. Like looking into a pit that went up instead of down. My mind could not understand its size. 1,000 meters? 1,000,000? Maybe what we saw was only one small part of it. A finger. A shadow. Maybe its real body stretched beyond the stars. There is no useful way to describe it. It was simply too much. Then, more things dropped from the sky. Bodies, men, women, children. Some wore uniforms from wars that happened long before I was born. Others wore clothes from different periods. Some bodies were swollen. Some dried black. Some were little more than bones wrapped in skin. A few still moved. Most did not. All of them hung from invisible lines. Hundreds, they began circling the boy in the log. Slowly, like a terrible carousel, their heads hung back. Necks stretched unnaturally. Arms swayed. Some groaned. Some cried. Others were silent because they had probably been dead for years. Maybe decades. Maybe centuries. They were bait. Old bait. The Danglemoth collection. The smell was impossible. Imagine opening a grave filled with 100 bodies all at once. Rotten meat, old blood, wet earth, bones, everything mixed together. The bodies circled closer to Sonny. They called to him. Some used voices that sounded human. Some didn't. He kept screaming. Then I saw someone I recognized. My grandmother. She still wore the same clothes from earlier that evening. Mud still covered her legs. Her hair was still wet. She had never made it back home. Grandfather saw her too. His entire body broke. He dropped to his knees. Because his hand was gripping mine, I fell with him. No. He started sobbing. The moment we moved, every hanging body stopped. Then, all of them turned toward us. Every face, every dead eye, every broken neck. Grandmother swung forward. She came closer to grandfather. Her mouth opened. She tried to speak. Only a long groan came out. Grandfather reached toward her. Undine. Meringue Saley screamed his name. Too late. Grandfather shot upward. There was no warning. 1 second he was beside me. The next, he was flying into the darkness. His neck snapped almost instantly. I heard it. A sharp crack. That sound has stayed with me my entire life. I tell myself he died immediately. I need to believe that. Meringue Saley pulled the old Concord pack from her pocket. She finally opened it. Inside was white salt mixed with dark shells. Some looked burned, some looked new. She grabbed a handful. Ending. She blew the mixture from her palm. Black and white grains scattered into the air. Then everything stopped. No slow ending. No retreat. One moment, the sky was full of bodies. The next, stars were visible again. Shelley was gone. The corpses were gone. The enormous black shape was gone. So were my grandparents. I remained frozen in the square. For a long time, nobody moved. Then people began collapsing. Some cried, some vomited, some prayed. Meringue Saley came to me. She covered me with something. I don't remember what. She told me not to look toward the sky. I asked where grandfather was. She didn't answer. I asked where grandmother was. Again, nothing. The boy in the log was dead. I remember adults pulling him out after sunrise. I won't describe what was left. I never saw Shelley again. I never saw either of my grandparents again. The official story, if you can call it that, was almost nothing. Nobody spoke openly about what happened. That was how things worked in small places back then. There were old stories, old rules, things adults knew, but children were not supposed to hear about. The Danglemouth was one of those things. After that night, I learned the story. People said it had lived around the mountains longer than anyone remembered. Some called it a spirit. Some called it a demon. Some said it was not alive at all. The stories said it used living creatures as bait. Animals, people, anything someone might follow. You would see a missing cow in the trees, a lost child, someone you loved. They would call to you. If you followed, the Danglemouth would take you. That was apparently how it hunted. Not with speed, not with teeth, with love, with curiosity, with grief. It showed you something you could not leave behind. I never fully understood what the people in the square were doing. From what I later learned, covering themselves in filth and standing like trees was supposed to hide them. The Danglemouth did not see people the way we did. If you smelled like earth and waste, stayed completely still, and changed your shape, perhaps it mistook you for part of the environment. Or perhaps it simply ignored you. I don't know. The boy in the center was deliberately used as bait. That truth was difficult for me to accept. But people believed that sometimes giving the Danglemouth one person kept it from taking an entire village. I still hate that thought. I don't know who chose Sonny. I never asked. Maybe I was afraid I would learn that someone I loved had agreed to it. As for the salt in the Concord pack, I still don't fully understand that either. Meringue Saley once told me it was not ordinary salt. Some had been mixed with ash, some with crushed shells, some had been blessed, some cursed. That was all she would say. Whatever it was, it made the Danglemouth disappear, but it did not bring anyone back. Meringue Saley left the province not long afterward. She moved to the city. So did many other families. Our town slowly emptied. People said they left for work, better schools. better opportunities. Maybe some did. Others left because they had seen what I saw. I left too. I eventually became a mechanic, built a life, worked, got older. I rarely returned to the province. When I did, I never stayed after sunset. People laugh when I tell them that. Let them. I am too old to care. Sometimes I miss the provincial air, the smell of wet earth, cooking fires, grass, tobacco, the way mornings felt cool before the sun climbed over the hills. I miss grandfather's cigars. I miss grandmother calling me inside for food. I even miss Shelley standing near the fence, chewing slowly and looking at us like we were the strange ones. But I do not miss the mountains at night. I do not miss silence. Whenever a place becomes completely quiet, I still hold my breath. It happens automatically. A power outage, a lonely road, a quiet forest. If the insects stop, I notice. If birds suddenly disappear, I notice. And if I ever hear a cow crying in the distance after dark, I leave. Immediately, maybe you don't believe me. That is fine. I probably wouldn't believe this story either if someone else told it. An old man talking about a giant darkness in the mountains, floating corpses, a cow hanging from the sky. It sounds ridiculous, but I swear on what remains of my life that I have told it as I remember it. There are things in old places that survive because people learn not to speak about them. Stories become jokes. Warnings become superstition. Rules become old-fashioned nonsense. Then one generation stops listening, and something hungry gets another chance. So if an old person ever tells you not to follow a familiar voice into the trees, listen. If your missing animal suddenly appears after weeks away, especially at night, do not run toward it. If the forest goes silent, go home. And if someone you love stands outside after midnight asking to be let in, remember what my grandfather told me. Hold your breath. Do not answer. Maybe one day I'll share another story with you, if anyone has the patience to listen to an old, retired mechanic. I have more than a few. But this one is enough for tonight. Even after all these years, thinking about the Danglemouth for too long makes me look toward the window. And just now, while finishing this story, I realized something. It is very late. The neighborhood outside my house is usually noisy. Cars, dogs, televisions, people talking. But for the last several minutes, I haven't heard anything. No cars, no dogs, no insects, nothing at all. I think I'm going to turn off the computer now. And hold my breath. Story 4. My biggest insecurity growing up was always where I came from. My family was working class. There was nothing glamorous about our life, nothing polished or sophisticated. My dad worked with his hands. My mom counted every dollar before going grocery shopping, and most of the people in my hometown lived the same way we did. There was nothing wrong with that, of course. I know that now. But when I was younger, I was ashamed of it. I hated the idea of people hearing my accent and immediately knowing I hadn't grown up around money. I hated not knowing which fork to use at certain dinners or what kind of wine went with what food. I hated hearing people casually mention ski trips, private schools, sailing holidays, and summers in Europe when my own family vacations had usually meant packing sandwiches into a cooler and driving somewhere cheap. So when I got accepted into a prestigious college on a scholarship, I decided I would become someone else, or at least look like someone else. I softened my accent. I copied the way wealthier students talked. I bought designer clothes from outlet stores and clearance racks, hoping nobody would notice they were from previous seasons. I learned which brands were considered tasteful and which were considered too obvious. I started eating things I could barely pronounce. Tiny canapes, imported cheeses, expensive cured meats. I memorized facts about art, finance, European travel, and anything else I thought made me sound cultured. And I avoided talking about my hometown whenever possible. Then I met Victoria. Victoria came from exactly the kind of family I had spent years pretending to belong to. Her parents had money, real money. The sort of money where people don't talk about being wealthy because wealth is simply the environment they live in. She had grown up traveling. She had attended expensive schools. Her family owned things I had only seen in magazines. Yet, strangely, none of it seemed particularly important to her. She wore nice clothes because she liked them, not because she wanted people to know what they cost. She could talk intelligently about wine, art, and travel, but she never used those things to prove anything. Maybe that was why she liked me. I was fascinated by everything she took for granted. She, in turn, seemed amused by how much effort I put into becoming someone I thought I needed to be. We admired what the other person had. At least that's how I saw it. I was always trying to impress her. I wanted her to know that I belonged with her. I wanted her family to think the same thing. Maybe more than anything, I wanted to convince myself. So I memorized ridiculous facts. I would casually mention sailing conditions in Monaco as if I regularly spent weekends there. I followed stock market reports even though I barely had enough money in my account to buy lunch. I learned the names of famous polo players. I would talk about restaurants I had never visited and hotels I had only read about. I was unbearable. Victoria knew exactly what I was doing. She would roll her eyes, smile, and let me continue. I think she found it more funny than annoying. My biggest attempt to impress her happened about a year after I turned 21. I decided to book us a weekend wine tasting trip. I knew almost nothing about wine. I knew red wine tasted different from white wine. I knew some bottles were expensive. I knew people smelled wine before drinking it. That was about it. But in my mind, a vineyard weekend represented everything sophisticated. Good wine, beautiful scenery, fancy people, refined conversation. So I searched online for wine tastings in California. I scrolled through different options until I found one that looked expensive enough to be impressive, but not expensive enough to destroy me financially. Scarlet Landing Vineyard. The pictures looked beautiful. It was in Napa Valley, surrounded by rolling hills and rows of grapevines. There was a private lodge where guests could stay overnight. Perfect. I booked it immediately. Victoria was excited when I told her. She had already been to several wine tastings before, including some in Europe, but she seemed happy that I had planned something for us. We packed my car and left on Friday. The drive was gorgeous. The weather was warm, the hills were green and gold, and vineyards stretched along the road for miles. I felt like I was driving into the life I had always wanted. While packing, I had also brought a tiny bottle of wine drops. That little bottle should have been a warning about how new I really was to drinking wine. Sometimes, after a glass or two, I got headaches. The drops were supposed to reduce sulfites and other things that could trigger reactions. They came in a little squeeze bottle, a few drops in the glass, and supposedly you could drink without feeling awful afterward. I was embarrassed by them. The idea of sitting in a beautiful vineyard and secretly squeezing medicine into an expensive glass of wine felt completely uncultured. I imagined someone seeing me do it and thinking I was ruining the drink. So I decided I probably wouldn't use them. I put the bottle in my pocket anyway. When we finally arrived at Scarlet Landing, I was immediately impressed. The vineyard was far from the main road. Rows of grapevines surrounded the estate in every direction. The main lodge looked old and elegant, with dark wood, stone walls, large windows, and decorative balconies. It looked like the kind of place wealthy people would describe as rustic, even though it probably cost more than my parents' entire house. We parked near the entrance. A woman came out to greet us almost immediately. Her name was Pauline. She wore a stylish autumn coat, tall boots, and a scarf that looked like it cost more than everything I was wearing. She smiled warmly and welcomed us inside. The lodge was even more impressive from within. There were polished wooden floors, chandeliers, framed paintings, and furniture that looked antique. Pauline brought us into a lounge where the other guests were already waiting. Victoria and I were easily the youngest people there. Everyone else seemed to be in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. They were well-dressed, quietly confident. The type of people who looked expensive without having anything obvious to prove it. I immediately felt intimidated. Then, I immediately started pretending I wasn't. The guests were friendly. We introduced ourselves and started talking while enjoying cheese, cured meats, crackers, olives, and fruit from a large serving board. Naturally, I began showing off. I talked about different wine regions. I mentioned French vintages I had only read about. I discussed cultural differences between European and American dining. Victoria looked at me from across the table. Her expression said, "Please stop." I ignored it. The older guests seemed convinced. They nodded along. One man even asked my opinion about Italian wine. I gave him an answer that was probably 90% nonsense. Still, he seemed satisfied. For the first time, I felt like I had done it. I was fitting in. I was among the kind of people I had spent years trying to become. Eventually, Pauline returned and brought us to the wine tasting counter. I tried not to look too excited. For Victoria, this was familiar. For me, it was my first real tasting. The sommelier introduced himself as Francois. He started with white wines. First came a Riesling, then Pinot Grigio, then Chardonnay. I took a small sip from each. The wines were definitely different from the cheap bottles I had tried before. They were stronger, more complex. There was a clean acidity to them. But there was something else, too. Something strange. They were sweet, too sweet, and salty. Not strongly salty, but enough to notice. It gave the wine a strange, almost biological taste. I had no idea whether that was normal. So instead of admitting I was confused, I started pretending to be impressed. "Wonderful," I said. "Really bright citrus character. There's definitely an oak body here. Maybe stone fruit? Peach?" I swirled the glass while talking. I must have looked ridiculous. Victoria took another sip. Her face tightened. "These are really salty." The room became slightly quieter and kind of sickly sweet. I looked at her. She looked genuinely uncomfortable. I laughed awkwardly. It's probably part of the profile. Victoria stared at me like I was an idiot. Pauline smiled politely. "Perhaps you'll prefer the reds." The other guests drank happily. They knew to taste the wine and pour the rest into a basin. I didn't. I had already finished every glass. I thought wasting wine would look unsophisticated. Then Francois brought out the reds. Pinot Noir, Malbec, Shiraz. This time I slowed down. I picked up the glass, swirled it carefully, smelled it, and took a sip. The flavor hit me differently. There was the normal dark fruit taste I expected. Earth, berries, spice, but beneath all of that was something metallic, warm, heavy, almost like I had bitten the inside of my cheek and tasted blood. Of course, I didn't think that at the time. I assumed expensive wine simply had flavors I didn't understand. Excellent, I said. Blackberry, cherry, maybe a little spice. Very tannic. Victoria looked at me in disbelief. She had barely touched hers. Finally, she forced herself to take another sip. She immediately covered her mouth. For a second, I thought she was going to throw up. She placed the glass down. Sorry, she said quietly. I really don't like these. Pauline watched her. Victoria continued. They taste wrong. Are you sure they're not expired? Or maybe something got into one of the barrels? I wanted to disappear. I thought she was humiliating us. This was a respected vineyard. These people obviously knew wine. If something tasted strange, surely that meant I simply wasn't experienced enough to appreciate it. People ate caviar. People ate truffles. People ate foie gras. Lots of expensive things tasted strange. Maybe this was the same, an acquired taste. And I wanted everyone to believe I had already acquired it. Victoria eventually said she wasn't feeling well. She decided to go back to our room. I should have gone with her. Instead, I said goodnight. I actually apologized to Pauline after Victoria left. That memory makes me sick now. I apologized because my girlfriend trusted her instincts. Then, I stayed. I finished the tasting. I kept talking. I kept drinking. I laughed with the other guests and enjoyed the attention. These were the people I wanted to become. Then Pauline approached me. The owner would like to meet you. I almost laughed. The owner? She nodded. Mr. Bertrand, he has heard quite a bit about you. Apparently, he wanted me to join him for dinner. I couldn't believe it. Had I impressed everyone that much? Was my fake knowledge actually working? Maybe he thought I had some kind of potential. Maybe this was networking. Rich people always talked about networking. This could be my chance. That was the moment I should have returned to the room. I should have found Victoria. I should have put our bags in the car and left. Instead, I followed Pauline. She brought me into a private study. The room was exactly what I imagined a wealthy vineyard owner's study would look like. Bookshelves, dark wood, old paintings, leather chairs, a fireplace. I sat there alone for almost an hour. I didn't even mind waiting. I felt like I belonged in the room. Finally, the door opened. Bertrand entered. He was an older man with salt and pepper hair. He wore a vest, dress shirt, and ascot. He looked almost unreal, like someone had designed him specifically to look wealthy. Mr. Jaden, he said warmly. He shook my hand. It is a pleasure. He told me Pauline had said I enjoyed the tasting. Then he offered me a glass of Merlot. Merlot was actually my favorite. Not because I knew anything about it. I simply liked the taste. We sat at a private dining table. Bertrand poured the wine himself. He handled the bottle with the same careful skill as Francois. I watched him closely. There was so much I thought I could learn from someone like him. I began talking again. I told him Scarlet Landing was exceptional compared with other wineries I had supposedly visited. I complimented the crystal glasses and claimed I owned similar ones. I mentioned markets, Travel, wine, whatever came into my head. Bertrand listened. He smiled. Then eventually he stopped me. I know where you come from. The sentence killed my confidence instantly. I stared at him. He smiled again. You need not pretend with me. He knew. He knew about my family, my upbringing, my scholarship, my attempts to appear wealthier, my fake accent. I don't know how he knew so much, but he did. I felt exposed. Then Bertrand surprised me. He said that was why he liked me. I was not born with a silver spoon either, he said. He explained that he had also come from a poor family. He had spent his youth trying to rise above where he had started. He admired ambition. He admired people who understood the value of luxury precisely because they had grown up without it. I value those who appreciate the finer things, he said, especially those who had to live without them. By then, I was drinking my second glass of Merlot. The strange flavor was still there. Earthy, metallic, almost meaty. It was also warmer than normal wine. I was too drunk and too flattered to care. Then Bertrand told me why he had invited me. He wanted someone to take over Scarlet Landing one day. He said he was getting older. He needed someone young, ambitious, composed, someone who respected the vineyard. And he thought that person might be me. I thought I had won the lottery. Me, the poor kid pretending to be wealthy, owner of a Napa vineyard. I immediately started imagining my future. Then I asked whether Victoria could be involved too. Bertrand's smile changed. No, I laughed slightly. Why not? He looked toward his glass. We have better uses for types like her. Something about those words cut through the alcohol. The room suddenly felt colder. Types like her? Bertrand didn't explain. I told myself I was drunk. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe he meant she wouldn't enjoy managing a vineyard. Still, I wanted to leave. I stood and politely said goodnight. Bertrand didn't stop me. Outside the study, the estate was dark. The lodge had poor lighting at night, and I was far from sober. I wandered through the hallways, trying to find the guest rooms. I opened one door. Wrong room. Another. Storage. Then I found a wooden door that I thought led toward our room. I opened it. The room beyond was dark except for several lamps. People were inside, all the guests from the tasting. They had changed clothes. Every one of them wore black. And in the middle of the room was Victoria. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my eyes adjusted. She was lying on a table, barely conscious. Her clothing had been removed. There were tubes, machines, glass containers, and metal equipment around her. The place looked partly like a medical clinic. There were machines that looked designed to store blood. Others appeared to separate liquid into different components. But nobody was using proper medical equipment to draw her blood. They were using knives. Each person stood near a different part of her body. Her wrists, her ankles, her thighs. Blood ran from cuts into wooden buckets. Victoria's skin was almost white. Her eyes were partly open. I don't think she understood where she was anymore. I tried to shout. Nothing came out. My first instinct was to attack them. My stomach reacted first. I vomited. Wine and food splashed across the floor. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Bertrand, well, he said calmly, this saves me the trouble of explaining. I turned. He wasn't smiling anymore. I kept vomiting. Between the retching and panic, Bertrand explained Scarlet Landing's secret. The red wines contained human blood. The white wines contained plasma. Ross contained smaller amounts of both. He said human blood created a richer flavor, a deeper body. a natural complexity no grape could produce by itself. I stared at him. Then I looked at Victoria, and suddenly every strange taste from earlier made sense. The salt, the sweetness, the metal, the warmth. I had spent all afternoon drinking someone's blood. Bertrand continued speaking like he was explaining an ordinary recipe. He had built Scarlet Landing around this philosophy. He hated wealthy people who did not appreciate what they had. People born into privilege. People like Victoria. Those who inherit everything and value nothing do not deserve what they have, he said. Then he looked at the buckets. But their blood still has value. The guests nodded. I realized they weren't victims. They were part of it. They came here knowing exactly what Scarlet Landing was. Maybe that was why they had accepted the taste so easily. Bertrand looked back at me. He considered himself different. Like me, he had come from nothing. But unlike me, he had turned that resentment into hatred. He didn't want to become wealthy. He wanted revenge on anyone born wealthy. Then another realization hit me. The Merlot. The warm Merlot I had been drinking with dinner. I looked at Victoria again. Bertrand saw my expression. His smile returned. Yes, I had been drinking her blood. Not pure blood, small amounts mixed into wine. But it was hers. My girlfriend had been bleeding somewhere in this building while I sat in Bertrand's study bragging about wealth I didn't have. I fell to my knees. Victoria barely moved. Bertrand stepped closer. You have a choice. I looked up. You can join me. He pointed toward Victoria. Or you can join her. I looked at her. She was no longer moving. Her face was completely drained of color. I knew she was dead. And I knew if I refused, they would do the same thing to me. My hand moved into my pocket. The little bottle. The wine drops. That embarrassing bottle I had been ashamed to use. I wrapped my fingers around it. Then I stood. Bertrand probably thought I had accepted. I stepped toward him. Then I pulled the bottle out and squeezed the entire thing into his eyes. He screamed. The liquid wasn't designed to blind anyone, but it apparently burned enough to disorient him. He grabbed his face. That was all I needed. I ran. The others shouted behind me. Several chased me. Then I heard crashing. Slipping, cursing, my vomit was still across the floor. Wine, food, blood, at least two of them, went down. I didn't look back. Adrenaline sobered me faster than anything else could have. I ran through the lodge, out the main door, across the parking area. I jumped into my car. The engine started. I drove, not carefully, not normally. I drove straight through the vineyard. Rows of grapevines disappeared beneath the front bumper. Posts broke. Branches snapped. I turned the wheel and destroyed another row. I wanted to damage anything I could, anything that might stop them from producing another bottle. Then I found the road. I never went back. I called the police. I told them everything. Victoria, the blood, the guests, Bertrand, the wine. They listened, at least technically. But the investigation never seemed serious enough. By the time authorities properly searched the property, Scarlet Landing had been cleared out. Equipment gone, wine gone, staff gone, Bertrand gone. The vineyard had apparently completed its harvest and shut down. Just like that. I have no idea how much influence Bertrand had. Maybe he paid people. Maybe some of the guests had connections. Maybe the police simply thought my story was insane. I still don't know. Victoria never received justice. Her body was never found. Her family was told she had disappeared. I knew better. I knew exactly where she had died. I knew what had happened to her blood. That weekend changed me. Everything I had been embarrassed about suddenly seemed ridiculous. My dad's work clothes, my hometown accent, cheap beer, my mother counting grocery money. Those things were honest. I had spent years pretending to be someone else, and that obsession had brought me directly into Bertrand's world, a world where wealth, refinement, taste, and cruelty had become mixed together until nobody inside could tell the difference. I stopped pretending. I stopped changing my accent. I stopped memorizing facts just to impress people. I stopped buying clothes because of labels. Eventually, I went into the same kind of physical work my father had done. I drink the same cheap beer he liked. And I'm proud of it. I think Victoria would have preferred this version of me. The real one. I wish I had become him while she was alive. Maybe then, when she told me the wine tasted wrong, I would have listened. Maybe I would have trusted her. Maybe we would have left together. That thought hurts more than anything. I can't bring her justice. I can't undo what happened. But I can refuse to become anything like Bertrand. I can live honestly. No pretending, no shame, no obsession with looking wealthy. Still, some things stay with you. Every now and then, I'll be sitting in a pub, drinking beer. I'll take a sip, and there will be something strange in the taste. Metallic, a little salty, warm almost. Whenever that happens, I stop. I look at the glass, and I remember Scarlet Landing. I remember the buckets, the machines, the dark room, Victoria on the table. Sometimes I wonder if Bertrand is still out there. Maybe he started another vineyard. Maybe wine became too risky. Maybe he moved into beer. Whiskey, restaurants, who knows? Maybe the blood is still being sold somewhere under a different name. Maybe wealthy people are drinking it tonight and praising its depth and complexity. Or maybe none of that is happening. Maybe cheap beer sometimes tastes metallic. Maybe I'm paranoid. Maybe after everything I went through, I simply can't trust my own taste buds anymore. That's possible too. After all, I spent years pretending I knew what good wine tasted like. Turns out, I never had a clue. Story 5. It started a few weeks ago. At first, it was only a poster. I was standing at the train station on my way home from class when I noticed it taped to one of the metal poles near the platform. It was just a normal white sheet of paper, held in place by 2 dirty pieces of tape, one at the top and one at the bottom. The wind kept catching it. Every time a train passed or a stronger breeze moved through the station, half the paper would lift and fold over itself. Still, I could see the large red word printed across the top. Missing. I don't know why it caught my attention. Missing person posters weren't exactly unusual in a city this size. You saw them occasionally on telephone poles or inside convenience stores. Sometimes they were for teenagers who had run away. Sometimes elderly people with dementia. Sometimes pets. Most people glanced at them and moved on. That's what I planned to do. I stood several feet away and tried to read whatever information I could see without walking closer. A young woman, early 20s maybe, missing after work. There was more writing underneath, but the wind folded the page again. Then my train arrived. The brakes screamed against the rails, and everyone on the platform began moving toward the doors. I grabbed my backpack and followed the crowd. Just before I stepped onto the train, the wind dropped the paper back into place. For one brief moment, I saw her face. Curly black hair surrounded her cheeks. She had a wide smile. It looked like the picture had been taken while she was laughing. Then the paper folded again. I put my headphones back in properly, turned my music up, and stepped onto the train. I forgot about her before I reached the next station. At least, I thought I did. Over the next few days, I started seeing the posters everywhere. There was one taped to a stop sign near campus. Another appeared on a telephone pole 2 streets from my apartment. I saw one on the wall outside a coffee shop. Then another beside the entrance to a grocery store. Soon, people were sharing her picture online, too. Facebook, Instagram, local community pages, university groups. Everywhere I went, there she was. The more often I saw the poster, the more familiar her face became. Eventually, I didn't even have to read the name. I could recognize her instantly. The photograph looked like it had originally been taken with a group of friends. Someone had cropped the others out. You could still see part of another girl's shoulder and arm beside her. The missing woman was holding on to that person's arm, smiling so widely that she looked like she was in the middle of laughing. Her hair was probably the first thing most people noticed. Long black curls fell over her shoulders and down her back. Some strands rested across her collarbone and framed her face. She wore a white crop top and black mid-rise pants. Her stomach was exposed enough to show a navel piercing and several tattoos. She had detailed flowers and other designs covering parts of her stomach and hips. A snake tattoo began around her right forearm and curled upward, disappearing underneath her sleeve. She had a Medusa piercing beneath her nose and another piercing through one eyebrow. Part of that eyebrow had been shaved into a slit. Her makeup was heavy. Large black wings around the eyes. Dark lashes. Overlined lips. She was attractive, definitely, just not really my type. After seeing the posters enough times, I eventually knew all the information without needing to read it.